Hello everyone and welcome back to the Women's World Chess Championship. It's Aleksandra Goryachkina with the white pieces against Ju Wenjun, and it's game 5. If you've been following the coverage so far, and by coverage I mean the one game we've covered, the first 3 games ended in a draw. Then Ju Wenjun won her first game, and now it's, Goryachkina really needs to bounce back if she wants to get back into the fight for the title. So, like I said, the first 6 games will be played in Shanghai, China, and then the other 6 in Vladivostok, Russia. So this is still being played in China. Without further ado, let's check it out. It is a very nice game. So Goryachkina with the white pieces opens with c4, the English opening. We have knight to f6, knight to c3. We have e6 and e4, the Mikenas variation of the English. And d5, striking in the center. We have c captures, e captures, and then now e5, attacking the knight on f6, and now knight to e4. d4 is also playable here, and statistically even black has better results with this move. However, it's a personal preference, I guess. Which do you prefer? So knight to e4 and knight to f3. Continuing development, we have bishop to f5, black does the same, and now d3. Kicking away the knight, and the knight will now capture and improve white's central pawn structure. So d4 is coming, and the white will have a very nice center. c5, continuing the fight for the central squares. We have d4 and queen to a5 now, pinning the c3 pawn, but also just threatening to capture it. We have bishop to d2, blocking, and knight to c6. Ju Wenjun continues developing pieces and fighting for the center. And here this allows white this breakthrough in the center c4, which comes with an attack on the queen. And this is still all considered theory. Queen back to d8, and now there is only one good move here for white that, theory agrees that gives white the advantage. It's queen to b3, and it's a known position. For example, it was reached in in Batumi in Georgia in the 2018 Olympiad between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Vishwanathan Anand, where bishop to e6 was played. That game ended in a draw, but here Ju Wenjun decides for bishop to e4 to keep the pawn defended with the bishop from e4, and also it puts pressure on the knight on f3. It's not a new move, it has been played before, and we have queen captures on b7 now, grabbing a pawn, threatening to capture the knight, rook to c8 defending, and now there is one game in the database where knight to g5 was played, and it's very interesting. Knight to g5 is the engine's top recommendation, whereas Goryachkina played bishop to g5, and this is a move not even considered by the engine. Okay, if you consider maybe the engine's top 5 or maybe top 10 recommendations, I'm sure bishop to g5 will be there, but it's not amongst the top 3. So it's very interesting. It's definitely homebrewed poisonous preparation, and it will be very interesting to see how Ju Wenjun will deal with this bishop to g5 move, as I would say it's impossible to imagine that she prepared for this move. And of course it is a new move in the position, so it is as of move 14 that we have a completely new game. So basically you're deciding between queen d7, queen c7, and bishop to e7, blocking the bishop's attack towards the queen. Queen d7, you kind of don't want to play, as captures, your king loses castling rights, which maybe isn't such a bad thing, since you kind of do want to keep your king in the middle of the board when the queens are off the board, but there are still a lot of pieces here, so maybe not that. So if queen to c7, then white can just trade, captures here, bishop recaptures, and bishop to b5. The rook is coming to c1, is going to put a lot of pressure here, so it's hard to say what you would do here, but it perhaps is playable but not very enjoyable, and especially if you go for captures, which wins a pawn, but then rook to c1 will be terrible for black. You have to defend king here. The knight is under attack twice. Also, it's pinned. Just bishop f4, e6 is coming, and definitely something Goryachkina prepared if black decides for this defense. So instead, after bishop to g5, we have bishop to e7, and now bishop captures on e7. We have knight captures on e7, and now queen to b5 with check. Asking, are you ready to move the king? At which point maybe I can capture and then capture on c5, create a passed c-pawn. Of course, Ju Wenjun is not interested. Queen to d7 is played. We have c captures on d5, bishop captures, and now queen captures on d7. king captures on d7, and here comes bishop to b5 check. So what do you play here? Well, it's not all that pleasant for the black king. For example, you do not want to block with the bishop. If bishop here, just a4, and it's a perfectly well, not fine, but it's a great position for white. For example, you cannot capture. If you capture, then just knight captures. It's a really active position for white. Bishop captures, you're going to go a captures, the a7 pawn is now weak, you don't have time to bring the rook into the game, and it's well, it's very enjoyable for white. So instead, after this bishop to b5 check move, we have king to e6. It's a bold move since it's inviting knight to g5 to take the king further for the walk. If you imagine, for example, if the black king did not have access to the f5 square, knight to g5 would be mate. Fortunately for black, you do not have access to something like g4 since the knight is hanging. So okay, knight to g5 with check, king to f5, and now h4, cementing that knight on g5. Maybe not cementing, you can always kick it away, but defending it and preparing bishop to d7 check. So here black has to make a choice, whether it's moving the king, not allowing this check, but then you allow bishop d3 check and king to h6, and that's just a terrible position for the king. And even if it might be playable with engine moves, it's for a human, you do not want to put your king in such a position. You can go rook g1, g4, and it's going to be well, not a lot of breathing room for that black king there. So instead, Ju Wenjun decides for the active defense. She decides to pick up the two central pawns and give up the exchange. She plays c captures on d4, bishop to d7 with check, and now king captures on e5. We have bishop captures on c8, and now rook captures on c8. So here, Ju Wenjun is up a pawn, down the exchange, but she does have the very strong passed d pawn. So let's see how this unwinds. We have castles. Now the rook is ready to enter the game. King back to d6. We have rook fe1, putting the rook to an open e file, and now rook to c2, grabbing more space with the rook. It's a very active square for the rook, has a lot of control over the second rank, and now a3. The a2 pawn is no longer a target, so now you can move your rook. We have h6, pushing the knight back, knight to e4 check, and now bishop captures on e4. This is a very interesting decision, since the bishop is a useful piece here, attacking the king side. For example, you cannot push the f-pawn because there are a lot of threats towards the g2 pawn, but the knight is also a very strong piece in the center of the board. So Ju decides to get rid of it. Bishop captures, rook captures, and knight to c6, just defending the pass pawn. And now we have h5, stopping further expansion by black on the king side. And here, king to d5 seems to be the reasonable choice. King d5, you push away the rook, you push d3, d2. But black first decided to play g6. It's hard to imagine why, since it's never in your best interest to capture here to ruin your pawn structure, and this gives white counter-attacking chances with rook to f4. Now you can no longer push f5 because, well, if f5 just captures here, and now white has a very strong pass pawn. So here black is forced to capture on h5. We have g captures on h5, rook captures on f7, and only now does she push d3. And okay, rook d1. Stopping the pawn, and now d2, and now it's already there's the threat of rook to c1, which would just win the game. So how do you defend this with white? Feel free to pause the video and try to find what you would play here with the white pieces while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding one of the two good defensive ideas. One is king h2. It just doesn't allow rook to c1 to come with a pin. But there is an even better active move which which Goryachkina played, which is rook to f3. Which is quite simple now. Rook to c1 will be met with rook to d3 check. King moves, you pick up the pawn, and black has no more counterplay. It's 3 pawns each, but white is up the exchange. So instead, after this rook to f3, of course, knight to e5 was played, kicking away the rook, also not allowing rook to d3 check. We have rook to f4 now, again with the idea of checking and picking up the pawn, but now again feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for black while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a spectacular endgame player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to c4. This is the correct move. However, black played knight to c6. The difference is, with knight to c6, yes, you do have control over the d4 square, so the check is not possible. But knight to c4 is an attacking move, and it prepares knight to b2, which will get rid of the rook on d1. So for example, if king f1, and also this does nothing. This check does nothing. The king will just attack the rook, and the knight and rook already protect the d2 pawn. So here, king f1, king e5, you push away the rook, rook h4, knight b2 wins back the exchange. It doesn't matter. You will lose this with check, king d4, king e2. Now you grab it, captures, and well, just rook a2, and it's a drawn endgame. So knight to c4 would have been excellent here. However, knight to c6 was played, and now again pause the video and try to find the only winning move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, along with the two previous ones, congratulations, you are basically playing a world championship game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's king to f1. And now that the king is on f1, having access to the e2 square, black no longer has any threats. Rook to c1 is no longer a threat, just king e2. It's pointless, you don't want to trade. Next move, white will win the pass pawn, so everything is working out for white nicely. So king to f1, of course, was played by Goryachkina. We have king to e5, and now rook back to f3. Now knight to a5, hoping to reach that c4 and this to kick away the rook, but it's too late for such things. Just king e2. We have knight to c4, attacking the a3 pawn, but now rook to h3, preparing to pick up these pawns with check. We have rook to a2 now, again attacking the a3 pawn, but just rook h5 check. King to d4, and now rook h4 check. King back to c5, and now rook back to h3. Again, the problem being you do not have knight captures here because of rook captures on d2. Captures, and well, it's just 2 pawns each, where black is down the exchange. So of course, completely winning for white. So we have a5 instead, but now f4. Now Goryachkina is ready to push her pawns. We have king d5, now rook to f3. Of course, putting the rook behind the pass pawn, king e6, and now g4. We have a4 by Ju Wenjun, and now rook to h3, preparing to get rid of this pawn as well. So king d5, not allowing this to come with check, but now of course just f5, continuing to push the pass pawn. There's no hurry to pick up the h6 pawn. So we have king back to e5, but now rook to c3. Attacking the knight, and here black just had to play something. She played knight captures on a3, with the idea that it's a little trick. Now if you go for rook captures on d2, you just get rook captures, and knight to b1 check, which would white would blunder the game in a sense that white will not win this game any longer. For example, king c2, captures, and h5, and it's a draw. There's nothing to do. If you push, just captures, and if you capture, just captures, and the king will pick up this pawn, this king will pick up this pawn, and it's a draw by insufficient material. So after knight captures on a3, of course Goryachkina played rook to c5 check instead. We have king to d6, and now the beautiful f6, saying, okay, if you capture my rook, I'm just going to play f7, and there is nothing you can do to stop my passed f pawn. Ju played knight to c2 instead, now trying to meet f7 with knight to d4 check, king moves, and the knight to e6, where the knight will be defending the queening square. Still winning for white, but you don't want to give black any chances, unnecessary chances. So after knight to c2, just rook c4, taking away the d4 square from the knight. We have knight back to a3, and now rook to f4, putting the rook in front, behind the passed pawn. And here, I don't know if king d5 was played, or maybe the electronic board just picked up the king move, but it was in this position that Ju Wenjun resigned the game. And the first win in this match for Aleksandra Goryachkina, who equalizes and bounces back. And now there is one more game to be played in Shanghai today, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, now it's pointless because after the king moves, just f7, f8, queen, it's unstoppable. The rook cannot join in the action. The knight has no ways of even approaching the pawn. The rook nicely controls the fourth rank, and it's just over. So that was the moment in the game when that decision to play with the knight after this rook to f4 move, whether to go knight c6 to guard the d4 square, or to go knight to c4, which allows rook d4 check, but rook d4 check is pointless here because the d2 pawn is defended. You're just gonna go closer with the king, kick away the rook, and then force white to lose the exchange. This was the way to go, but it's, yeah, this is the difference between drawing a World Chess Championship game and losing a World Chess Championship game. So we might even use this. No, we will not use this as a thumbnail, since it will, you know, tell you where to go. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Game 5 of the Women's World Chess Championship match 2020 between Aleksandra Goryachkina and Ju Wenjun. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank George Taylor, Jack Obid, Twin Falls Company, Gustavo Candia, and Carlos Montero for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Women's World Chess Championship, the Tata Steel, and yes, still preparing the Paul Morphy saga, along with checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.